Feretesh came to me looking for job search strategies, but what she was really looking for was herself. See, I could tell by the way that she wrote in her podcast submission that there were clues that indicated that whatever I might tell her, she would have trouble following through on. Why? She was disconnected from herself. Because here's the thing, to know what you want to do, you have to first know who you want to be. Now, of course, lots of things get in our way of that. Various wounds and traumas and toxic situations we've experienced in our past. But as you'll see in my session with Feretesh, I have a theory on how you can actually find your superpowers amidst these traumas. Superpowers that, when you tap into them, motivate you to take action more than any kind of attempt at willpower or accountability will ever do for you. So I invite you, dear listener, as I did with Feretesh, to scour your past like a detective, searching for clues that will propel you into the future. Because everything is there for you to learn from. And once you open your mind, you'll see that it can open your world. Let's dive in. What you wrote in was you would like confidence in applying for jobs daily and believing that I can get a part time job which pays well, creates value, and I love doing. The rest of the time to devote to getting healthier and fitter and training to be a dance and movement instructor. I must believe that I can become focused, organized, and disciplined enough to achieve all of this and fulfill my potential at the age of 60. And then I had asked anything else you want us to know. And you wrote this bit of context in. You said, I might be ADHD, I'm dyslexic, and have a lung condition, which means I'm a bit slow sometimes, parentheses, often. Though I've done various types of work, both paid and voluntary, during the past 22 years, I haven't worked, quote, properly or fully since 2011. And you had written in some other stuff in an earlier questionnaire with a lot of really interesting context about your background. But before we get into all of that, I would love to first thank you for coming on. And second, is that all accurate? And any additional context that you think I should know?
Like hearing it read back to me just brought tears to my eyes and also just made me, I don't know, this voice said to me, oh, you're so pompous, thinking, wishing that you want to do these things. Yeah, so
That's so interesting to me that that's what you think. I am glad that you are being very vulnerable, which means you're open to hearing and doing differently, maybe, because what's got you here is not getting you where you want to go. Now, in a
yeah,
lot of sessions, I ask tons of questions to begin, but I actually feel like I have a pretty good hunch of next steps for you right off the bat. So I want to go into just a little bit of a monologue, if you don't mind. On my end, I might just speak a lot, which is totally different from how I usually do other sessions where you're the one speaking. So is that
okay,
okay with you if I take up the airspace for the beginning of the session?
absolutely, yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Listen, when I see what you write in, which is this desire for a job and to fulfill potential, my first impulse is to say, okay, let's dig into your strengths and your background and experience and things that make you curious and light you up. And let's get strategic and apply for jobs. And you will do all of those things. But that is like building a house and ignoring the foundation upon which the house is built.
Yeah,
And there were certain words that you used when you wrote in that really signaled to me that the foundation is too rocky. Because if I give you next steps on updating your LinkedIn, you're
yeah,
going to do it right after our call for about 30 minutes. And then you are going to not be inspired to do it anymore. And then you're going to blame yourself. You're going to think it's your fault. No,
yeah,
it's simply because we did not address the foundation first. And by the way, when I say you, I'm talking about me too. I'm talking about all the people who are watching and listening. This is so many people in the Ladies Get Paid community. We've got 50,000 folks. So when I say you're not alone, I know that you're not alone. I have that the proof. I got the receipts. Okay. So the foundation of the house. Let me tell you the words that you use that stood out to me. And so everybody watching, listening, pay attention to language you use because consciously or subconsciously, they represent deep-seated beliefs you have that are leading to, quote, bad habits. So here's the words: focused, organized, and disciplined. Okay. Enough, achieve, fulfill my potential. Okay. So when I see this, I go, she has a certain ideal of what it takes to develop into the person she wants to be. The thing that's dangerous with having a certain ideal of what we think we need to do or be in order to, I don't know, be fulfilled or become happy or whatever it is. It's very rigid. And we try really hard to do these things, right? Discipline, for example. And then it's not working for you. And you go,
Yeah.
why is this not working? Why isn't it working? That's because we need to question, is this even the right way to go about things for me? Maybe it is for that, I don't know, white man who hasn't had trauma in his life, which, by the way, every single person has had trauma. So that's not even true. But it's this sort of aspiration that doesn't really fit who you are and
Yeah.
how you're wired. So it's
Yeah.
almost like you've misdiagnosed yourself here. So, of course, like prescription isn't going to work because the diagnosis was wrong. Then
Yeah.
other things that really stuck out to me were the use of quotations. So if anyone listening or watching notices that they also use quotations in their life when they talk about things, I find that very telling. You wrote properly in quotations. I know what you mean by that, because
Yeah.
properly, I'm assuming, is like full time effectively or
Yeah.
paid. But again, it indicated to me that there is a somewhat rigid definition of what work looks like or what success is. I would love to hear your thoughts and feelings based off of what I've shared so far.
Yeah, definitely. That's wonderful what you've said. It makes sense what you say. I do feel like I think that's one of the things I read is that I think there's some kind of psychological block, and it just totally makes sense what you say about the Rocky Foundation,
Mhm.
and because I do all the actions. I have been looking at my emails, and I have sent hundreds of emails. I've done some really meticulous applications, really meticulous. I've spent hours and days on them. I've done all the things that I've done in the past that worked, but it doesn't anymore. And so I've done the actions, and I still continue to do the actions. But yeah, that just totally makes sense when you say, what's your kind of what's the word modus operandi?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah.
And so yes, I have to think. Yeah, and I think not only do I have to think about that, but also to validate it
Mhm.
rather than saying, oh no, this is not how people do it. But and like one thing that comes to my mind, for example, now with CVs and application forms, apparently it goes through the software. So
Mhm.
even though I've done all the updating and I've done it through all the, I don't know, the AIs or whatever, it still doesn't even get an interview for me. And I think I know I'm really capable, and exactly what you said, that even though I haven't worked 9 to 5 since there, and the reason that I stopped working 20 odd years ago is because I became very ill.
Yeah.
I became very ill because I had a similar situation to one of your other clients that I listened to their podcast, and they'd been traumatized because they were a whistleblower.
Yeah.
So I've always been in a caring profession, and like looking at people on the ground level is really important. So what I ended up challenging the place that I was working, and they'd actually headhunted me without any references because they knew I was very good and they knew from before. But once at some point I started challenging them, then that's when I got heavily, I don't know, punished if is the right word.
Mhm.
And then and even though I won the case and everything, and I tried so hard to have dialogue, so hard. I'm somebody who always likes to have dialogue and try, and but then once I wasn't getting anywhere, and I was saying, look, you're dealing with public money, you're getting public money to serve the clients, most of them quite vulnerable, and if you're not doing this, then you're not basically giving the public the service that they should be. So but said, I got very punished, I got heavily punished, and then so I haven't, so this properly, I haven't worked 9 to 5 since then, but I have done a lot. I've done like art workshops, I've managed our home, so we like to rent out, so we went traveling for a few years, and I've helped my dance teacher in the past. I'm very good at event management, all sorts of stuff. And I'm always like, now that I think I might be ADHD, I think, oh, that makes sense because I pay attention to a lot of the small details. I can see patterns, all sorts of different things. But I also get worried so much. Like when I said to you earlier that this voice said to me, oh, you're so pompous, then my mind's saying, oh, it sounds like you're telling Claire. And I think, oh, I'm being misunderstood. So all the time I'm worried. And I think, oh, but I think, Claire understood that you're talking about yourself.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
You
Uh,
understood that I was talking about myself, didn't
oh,
you?
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So
And it
if I make
and I
one
could
small,
not be farther. I believe, especially in coaching sessions, like oversharing, over talking is good, because even if it's something that you, when you reflect on it, say to me, I don't actually believe that. There is a part of you that does, because it wouldn't have said it otherwise. And so I think that's really telling. And that you also are getting stuck in this cycle of, you have a thought or take an action, and then you have a dialogue with it. And then you're stuck, right, in this spiral of, should I have said that? Should I not have said that? Did she understand it? Right. It sounds like you're questioning yourself a lot. Quick question though. So, this experience you had where you spoke up, and not just the experience of speaking up, but the experience, I think, of being very disappointed, right? It sounds like you care a lot. We're in a caring profession, and they were not doing things appropriately. And so there was first the kind of devastation and disappointment of, wow, these people are letting their clients down, or whatever the situation was. Then you speak up, and then it wasn't taken in good faith on their end. What do you think that did to you? We see what the fallout is, right? Which is that you haven't, quote, worked properly since then. But it obviously affected your belief system around either who you are, what you do, what you should or shouldn't do, the industry. Talk to me a little bit more about what you think, how you think that experience impacted your thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah, I'm crying because I think, again, you've said some great stuff. One is that you say, oh, oversharing is good. And I just think, yeah, because this is for me, this is a very important session I'm having with you. So it's like, let's see the point of kind of just coming out with stuff. Whereas a few months ago, somebody who was actually really lovely, but here, as part of the employability, I think she's a lovely lady as a senior president, but she said, oh, one of your problems is that you overshare. And I thought, but then I saw somewhere else that sharing means you're traumatized. But I like your kind of like analysis of it is that I don't feel like I'm I don't know, what does it mean to overshare? So, and the other thing you said is that I question myself a lot. I think you're absolutely right, because I think I'm always checking with my husband because I really trust his wisdom. And he says, and he's just incredibly supportive. And he says, but don't you know it? Don't you see it yourself? Or can't you, like, how he tries to bring it back to myself, to me taking responsibility for what I see. But yeah, but it seems to be always a pattern. Me speaking up, I always get heavily punished. It's the same where we live. There's things that have been done. I'm just going to be very conservative, my usage of the word, incorrectly, and I've contacted various organizations that deal with all sorts of stuff like GDPR or whatever, and because I know what's been done is incorrect, but the punishment I've been getting, and this is just in my own living sort of environment in my own home.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I think that's one of the things is that I struggle because I see that a lot that you can't or you shouldn't speak out or speak up. And yeah, I think it's probably got even worse. There is one thing that's changed is that whistleblowers are now protected, I think, legally, from what I understand here. At the time I wasn't. I was just yeah. So a long-winded answer to your question, I think you said disappointment, and I'm not sure I'd ever thought of it. Yeah, I was disappointed. These are people who I knew who had headhunted me without any references because they knew me, and then they turned on me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what has it done for me? I don't know. I think what you say is that this continual questioning of myself.
Yeah. By the way, with the oversharing, it's all context dependent, right? I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this yesterday, about sharing stories as the foundation of Ladies Get Paid and my work. But I also think of it as strategic authenticity. That's a whole other subject, where it's sharing who we are, but it's being very intentional with what we're saying and why, and all with the benefit of helping others, right? So there does need to be a filter, but it isn't a muzzle, right? So knowing the difference between kind of filter and muzzle and everything being context dependent. I'm really happy you shared all this though with me, because I think I see, to go back to the kind of diagnosis analogy here, is this all comes down to being able to trust yourself. And I've used this before in other sessions, but I'll just remind everyone, the Latin root of the word confidence is trust, right? So which I Really interesting. And how does one cultivate trust with themselves? The first step is thinking about, I think, how does anyone cultivate trust in anyone else, right? It's developing a relationship with yourself, first and foremost. And there's a book that I've talked a lot about, but I highly recommend that you check it out if you don't know it already. It's called No Bad Parts. Are you familiar with Dr. Richard Schwartz and the internal family systems modality of therapy?
No, I
Oh
don't
my
think.
gosh. I am so happy to change your life and recommend this book. Shout out to another woman named Talia Deljoux who recommended it to me. It absolutely changed my life. It's understanding ourselves as if we are a constellation. So instead of just being this like one person inside, which we are
Yes,
absolutely not, clearly,
yeah,
because you have these different voices going, you're too pompous. No, wait, did she understand what that meant? Those two voices, those were already two different constellations. And when you read this book and you go into more IFS, and I'm not a practitioner, I'm somebody who's received the therapy. So I speak a lot about it and I use some of those tools to help clients, but I'm not a therapist. You'll start to understand ways in which to dialogue with each of these different parts. And the
wow,
first step, though, is never to invalidate them, to never say, be quiet, you're wrong. All right. Because guess what? They pop back up anyway. And they do it in
wow,
a way that's even more maladaptive, AKA
yes,
destructive. Probably nodding right now because I can't see you, and everybody listening and watching is going, oh, I know what she's talking about. Because the more you deny or suppress something, it's like a bouncing balloon on the top of a pool. It pops back up. And so
yes,
the best thing is to create, I think, a practice for yourself of getting curious. What are these parts of you trying to get you to understand about them? And we need to take care of them first. Once we
yeah,
take care of these parts, they're not going to be distracting us from things that we want to do in our lives. That's why discipline doesn't work. Willpower, focus, that's just spending extra energy, especially if you're ADHD, which I have an instinct you probably are, and I'm, by the way, I'm bipolar type 2, which is, and I'm not sure that's what you are, but I've worked with some people who are. And once you get a handle on your chemistry, it's, oh wow, things don't have to be so hard. They can be challenging, but it'll be more like you're learning a new skill challenging rather than
right.
trying to fit a round whole circle into a square peg or whatever the fuck that analogy is. That's one thing I was going to say, and I'll let you jump in just a minute, but something I think would be really helpful for us to talk through is ways in which you can get into a practice of speaking up more, cultivating your voice. I have some ideas for how to do that. I'll just throw out there, and then I want to hear what you think about them, and then your own thoughts on them. Ways in which to see your voice is going back in time. Divide your life into decades, maybe. So we'll do 0 to 10 years old. Okay, 11 to, I can't do math. So whatever that, 19 years old. Okay, so you'll move on. Do all your decades and then write out just things that happened that you can remember. What are your major memories? Uh,
Mm, mm,
Any kind, good, bad, or because so what you're doing here is you are telling your story first to
mm,
yourself, okay?
mm,
And you're writing your memoir, but it's without the pressure of anyone else having to see it. You're not trying to monetize it. We're not getting a job off of it. But here's the thing. You are going to get a job from this because I think your story is your superpower. And I know this because you wrote in a little bit of your story to me that I didn't share here, on this podcast. It was about leaving your home country. I think you've seen a lot, you've gone through a lot, you're very culturally fascinating. I think you've lived many lives. There's so much richness in your story and wisdom that you have, but you don't trust that you can let it out because you've experienced some things and people telling you to not do that. And also, you might be speaking to the wrong people, quite frankly. Which I think you have that instinct because before we even got on, you're like, I feel like Americans would maybe understand me a little bit better, right? And that's the other piece of this instinct, right? There are parts of yourself. The theory of IFS, at least, is that there is one self, a soul, essentially, a core essence, and all
yeah,
of the other parts develop because they're trying to help us, but they're usually formed when we're quite young and they're not really mature. So then they maladapt, right, into things like perfectionism and that sort of stuff. But the goal is to be able to hear, what does the self have to say? What does that core essence, which by the way will always be calm, compassionate, clear. There's 8 C's that go along with it, which always tickles me because my name is Claire. But the goal is to cultivate a practice where you can hear that self, but just know that's going to take a long time. However, when you do this work of the decades, right, going back, you might find that there were points in your life where it did pop up and you did respect it and listen to it and honor it. And then you'll go, oh, wait, I already have demonstrated that I have the ability to speak up, to listen to myself, to trust myself, to be kind, to be strong, to be soft. I have contradictions, right? You will see the proof of your richness, but only if you document it. And I think that's important for every single person to do, but especially for those of us who get stuck in our heads. We're just not operating in, I'm going to use the word proof, or you're operating in programming instead of proof. But tell me,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts, feelings, questions based off of all that?
that makes sense what you said about programming. Yeah.
Can you already think of some times in the past? Does any memories come to, do you see how this might be helpful for you or not? I always like to dig into any kind of resistance you might have to doing this work, or if you can envision yourself getting stuck, etc., and helping you through that.
I'm just thinking about it, and also the link that you sent me about, and the one that you sent me yesterday, and it's about the narrative. So that kind of, there was a light bulb moment. Oh yeah, what is the narrative I'm telling myself? And I think you're saying it now, it just in a different way.
Because I want to interject for a quick second. Because at first, it's the narrative you tell yourself, and then it's what's the narrative we're telling the outside world to get the jobs you want.
Ah,
And they may be different, but they shouldn't be too different. But you first have to get clear with yourself of what is the story of your life and what you've gone through and what it taught you and what are your innate skills. And that's just going to help you, A, believe in yourself, but B, then be able to express it more specifically. I do wonder if speaking up is a theme here, and not just speaking up, but the difficulty to speak up. Talk to me about, what do you think and feel when I say, what about a career in advocacy? Because you've mentioned that you have had caregiving, or like care deeply about other people. You have an instinct to speak up, right? That seems where you're orienting, but you
mm.
haven't had a channel within which to express it. What if, and I'm making total things up, but whether it's advocacy for funding for arts education, or it's medical related, or, and again, I don't live in your country, so I don't know what advocacy work looks like there, but
Yeah.
is that an area that you've thought about before, done work in, and have any interest in
Yeah,
pursuing?
the work that that I mentioned, a big part of it was advocating. I've generally been in works where it's required giving emotional and practical support to people who, as far as I'm concerned, were vulnerable at that particular moment. I just think, and that's why I was very clear that we need to, if they came to us, they were vulnerable at that particular moment, and we should be giving them 100,000% rather than not giving. And a lot of the work did include advocacy on their behalf. But one of the things that I keep wanting to go back, but then I worry, which is to be working with, and I'm quite good at it because I'm incredibly empathic and incredibly respectful, and generally people talk to me even if they don't know me. Within minutes, people are telling me their life story. But when I was doing some interpreting for the health system here, because we didn't really have any support, and it wasn't just me, it was all the interpreters of all the different languages. And one minute you're interpreting for somebody who's doing a basic dental health checkup, next minute you're interpreting for somebody who's seen hangings, executions. But so there was nobody that I could go and talk to afterwards, and my husband would be the one that I'd be talking to get support. So I don't feel like it's good for my own mental health to
Yeah.
be be doing it. But obviously the arts are quite important for me. It's something that's definitely saved my life during several times in my life when I've been, what's the word, quite, I don't know if the word down is the right word. I suppose maybe I've just been quite vulnerable. So the arts are really important. I have been looking at various places, but again, this voice says, oh yeah, but things have changed. There's so many different people now. And like, you're slow, you need your glasses, you need 2 pairs of glasses, like long distance, short distance, and you're not so fast. And I have lost, I do feel that I am quite clever, but I've just lost some of my agility. I can't even run. Okay, we don't have much for public transport here, but if I had to run for the bus, and so again, all those voices, but I have been looking at a place where, because I just think, oh, maybe I should start with voluntary work again. I've been looking at that. But again, things are so different from before. Like now, voluntary work, they just want everything online. You've got to do things, we've got to learn things online. And I say, but it does, like, I need to have actual proper training. I know more than some of the places I go. I said, what's your policy around GDPR, around like training? And they just look at me as though like, I'm demanding, but these are the standards we had all those many years ago. But some of the places, they just, we weren't even talking about GDPR then. But yes, I have been looking at some voluntary work, thinking, oh, maybe that will then be a way in. It's got to be something where I'm not exhausting myself emotionally.
Yeah, I think that's very wise.
I've been doing that for decades, and I just don't feel like I can do it emotionally. I can exhaust myself. It's not good for me or for my husband to be exhausting myself emotionally. But I am definitely good at advocacy. Like, number of people I've helped, friends who might have wealthier than me, got loads more, but that maybe a big company's like sort of not done the right thing by them in terms of a service. So I help them write a letter to the chief exec, and normally they get some kind of response. I'm really good at writing to chief execs. When I find out that I don't get any results from talking to people on the ground level, like customer services, then I just write a letter to the chief exec and I find their details online, and then I write a very nice email, polite and with the facts, and just say, I'll be grateful for your help on this. And normally, almost always it gets sorted quite quickly. And actually, I'm digressing a bit. Like, they have a sort of like a well like place here where you can go and get all sorts of you can get it's a pharmacist, and it's also you can get like your beauty products. So there's one of the counters. They've never got anybody on the counter. On the beauty products counter, and every time I go, there's no one there. And I thought, oh, why don't I write to the chief exec of this place and say, can I come and can I like run your counter? I know nothing about makeup because I don't really put it on. But then they said, oh, you've got to stand for however many hours on your feet, and I can't do that because of my health. But I might actually still do that. I don't know. I'm definitely, art and culture and dance is definitely the thing that I'm like looking at. I do like advocacy, and human rights are really important to me. They're really important to me. And the more I look around, the more I talk to people, I realize how much so many people's rights are being, don't know what the right word is, trampled upon, and people give into despondency, or they haven't got information. So I'm pretty good at information, I think.
Okay, so I have this is all really helpful, by the way. And it's interesting that you then start talking about human rights, because I had written down the word justice. It sounds like you're somebody who, if you see something not being done right, you want to correct it. And it's because you want people's experiences to be better. And that could be everything from convenience to deep compassion. Want to go in a teeny bit of a direction that I know opens up a huge can of worms and we don't have that much time for, but I want to just experiment with you for a quick second. I think that if you can identify a core wound that you have had in your life, so this is probably going to be way long ago, childhood, and I've done this work with myself, by the way, in thinking about things that were very difficult in my growing up experience, I then have been able to see how so much of my natural impulses are to correct that wrong. Okay. And that I think is a superpower and can be monetized if you learn how to protect yourself. Because you said you've given away a lot of energy, you've been helping all these other people, you lost yourself. Listen, when I first started Ladies Get Paid, I was going across the country hosting town halls for women, in America to talk about their relationship with work and money, 200 people per event. It was very intense energetically. And I remember sobbing hysterically after one event because all these people were sharing these heartbreaking stories and I was letting it all into my body, which when you're empathetic, you do that. But you know why it's also really dangerous? Because you are losing sight of being able to listen to yourself, right? You now have all of these sort of the ghosts of these people's parts inside of you now, literally. So I think you're correct in your self-awareness to say, oh, I think it's a bit dangerous to go down that path. But I actually think if you can work on how to protect yourself, it is the path you should take because you clearly are innately going in this direction. If you are walking by a counter that every thousands, millions of other people are walking by, they look at it and they go, that's annoying. That person's never there. And guess what? Nobody takes the next step that you did. People coming to you having issues. What do I do? How do I handle it? You go, I'll write the letter to your boss or nobody does this. This is so unique. Okay. And whenever I hear people express things about themselves, I go that I think I've just never heard other people do. I go, this means you've got to be doing this somehow for a living. We've got to figure out how this strength is transferable to an industry that you're motivated by. However, in every choice we make, there's a sacrifice to it. Literally everything has a sacrifice. And right now, the sacrifice has been you. We cannot let that happen anymore. It's ironic, right? Because it's like the very thing that would make you come alive right now, since you don't know how to manage it, it's destroying you. But I don't know if Superman and kryptonite or whatever, there's probably some like superhero analogy out there for this. But I think that if you can spend some time researching practices for protecting your energy, I'll share one in our closing together that I've done that I have found really helpful for me. Even little practices like washing your hands. You may already be doing this, by the way, but I have found it to be helpful after I have an interaction with somebody like you and I. This is a very intense conversation. I'll go to the bathroom and I will do ritualistic washing of my hands and going, okay, this is not, I'm here in this moment with you. I'm feeling empathy, but I have to protect myself. And there's just that like physical marker of washing my hands has actually been helpful. All this stuff is helpful if you do it consistently enough. And I think if you know why you're doing it, and it's not just to get a job, okay? It's to respect yourself. I think going back in time, I know we're out of time here, but if you do have an instinct already that you would like to share, I'd be curious to hear. When you think about your life up till now, but particularly childhood, where maybe that desire to seek justice came from, to right a wrong, to make people feel good, like that probably came from both a good example set by somebody else, but also maybe a difficulty that was had that made you in particular care about this, whereas other people, I think, use the word modus operandi, like they just have something that's totally different and it's related to their family DNA. So I'm curious when I share all that, what's resonating, if anything? And yeah, I know I just opened up a can of worms in our last couple of minutes.
I think I can think of so many different wounds which I've been working on, but also the country I come from. It's not just me; it's many people, especially women, are wounded on a daily basis, and this continues. And I'm one of the fortunate ones, and I think all the more reason why, because that I'm like that anyway. There's a part of me that's just incredibly loving and giving. And so, yes, it's definitely, I feel like it's my responsibility. It's not a burden, it's a responsibility to share that good fortune of living life in a fairly free country. And so to be of encouragement to others, but not just people who are living in countries where they're being subjugated on a daily basis. It can be anybody. As I said, some people like out here, there are people who haven't had the same kind of restrictions or traumas that I've had, but still, I'm a bit of an information. I love information, and actually, it's taken me years to understand that it's so true that knowledge is power. But what really stood out for me as part of this conversation, the reason what you just said, is that I still carry the ghost of that. I think that's very important what you said. Everything is important, everything you say is they're gems. But that one, I think because I allow the vibration or the stories of other people or carry them with me and use the word ghost. It makes sense. And I've got to
you have to protect yourself and you also have to channel it. It's like these two things, right? So it's like I've learned how to protect myself, but I'm channeling it through hosting a podcast where people are sharing themselves. Because otherwise, I'm having these sessions in private and that feels like I've bottled it up. There's something about the publicness of it that allows me to free myself and the ghost of it. That's what I'm saying, finding a way. Again, it's this dual thing. You got to protect yourself, but also give it somehow. Let me give you a quick example and then we'll wrap up. A quick example of what I mean by looking at your life for what was difficult and then seeing it as a clue for things you can do moving forward and how to tell your story effectively. So when I did that sort of decades work, right, like 0 to 10, etc., what I've experienced, I saw a number of themes, as you will. And I know that you, like in your ADHD, you said like patterns, which is awesome. I saw that a commonality, first, lack of emotional intimacy was a big theme, okay, from my family. And okay, so like I was missing emotional intimacy. Then we moved a lot, including in the middle of the year. I developed like really good performance skills, right? I could be a chameleon. I could connect with people, new people easily. I got really into theater, right? So I was already starting to develop skills in reaction to the difficulty of moving a lot. And I was like pretty bullied in going into high school. There was a bunch of mean girls. They wrote me a letter saying 10 reasons why you're ugly and unpopular. Okay. And I had no friends my freshman year of high school. And so I was like deeply wounded of just, I was lonely. And by the way, I was probably already super lonely since there was a lack of emotional intimacy in my family. Hello, what do I do now? I've got 50,000 people in a community. And my raison d'etre, so to speak, is making sure that people never feel alone. And the way I do that is seeing yourself in another. So all the events I've hosted in person, they started by putting chairs in a circle and telling stories. This podcast, my teaching style when I go into conferences and companies, I'm giving very tangible takeaways, but it's always with a through line of a story, right? And saying, I am, you are me, right? This came from my past. I am seeking what I did not have growing up, and I have harnessed it now. So now it doesn't fuck me up, so to speak. I still struggle with it. Like in my own relationship, I'm the one who has difficulty being emotionally intimate. It will always be a struggle, but it's something that because I'm so aware of it, and instead of it just being a thing that like, oh, I have to deal with, no, it means that I am now deeply called to right this wrong, so to speak. Every single person has this in them to do. And I think you are ripe for it because you have so many feelings and thoughts, but you staying stuck in your head. You're applying for jobs. It's not working. Listen, I could look at your resume and your LinkedIn and probably help you get a job. But is it going to allow you to express your voice in the way that you're clearly craving? So I know that we didn't talk enough about job strategies, but I hope that these have given you some initial questions to reflect on, excavate your past, use that story to inform you. And then I think the story is what you lead with. And this goes, by the way, for anybody, especially if you are pivoting or you're experiencing ageism, the way that you stand out is by saying, I have lived a life. And here are the things, and again, you pick strategically depending on where you're applying or whatever it is. But you have grown up in a certain way and experienced things. not to say that work experience is not important, but if
Yeah.
this is actually who you are, I'll just give you a quick example. This woman I worked with applied for a personal finance job, never worked in finance. She was a designer, graphic designer. And it was down to her and this other candidate, this guy, and she was told that he worked at a similar place before. And she said to me,
Yeah.
Sarah, how can I compete?
Yeah.
I said, you can't compete with him if it's on experience. So we've got to dig into your personal story. Why finance for you? Why did you even apply for this job? And she said, because I got into a bad monetary place and taught myself personal finance. And so I'm really motivated to help other people, whatever. And I was like, that's what's going to get you the job. And it
Yeah.
did. And it
Wow.
did. But
Yeah.
again, you've got to, it's like having at the beach with a sieve. Like we've got a filter. There's a lot of like dirt and debris here that's in the form of all the voices, the parts of you that are trying to help you, but they're coming across very negative. We got to
Yes.
sort that out. Okay. You got to sift through that. And then we're going to get to the gold. The gold is not going to come in the form of necessarily happy memories. It's going to come in the form of the struggle and how the struggle informed who you are and what you give a shit about. And sounds like you're good at writing. I think once you nail the research part, which you also sound like you're well suited for because you said you like information, go dig into your past and your story
Mm.
and cultivate a practice of being very quiet with yourself, sitting with your story, and you may find that it starts to pour out of you. Let it, write it down, put it all in a certain place, and then know that the point of a website, a LinkedIn, a job interview, that is like the very last step where you are being very specific and strategic about what aspects you are pulling, right? So that the oversharing doesn't happen. But do not skip the step of at least oversharing with yourself because you have a lot of wisdom that you're not listening to.
Yeah.
Like I said, we got to sift through, right, all the parts of you that are throwing rocks. We have to respect them first before we can get to the gold. Anything you want to share before we wrap up this session? I really enjoyed it. I hope that you did too.
Oh my goodness, actually, I think I understand the word mind blowing now. Everything you say absolutely makes sense. And actually, I think there's a kind of somehow I can see a fresh perspective or different perspective on the concept or the idea, if that's the right word to use, of personal history and personal wounds. I totally agree with you in terms of making it into a positive,
Mm-hmm.
the superpower. I love that. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And actually, yeah, a lot of the superheroes that we see in the films, we love them. That always comes down to that they've had a wound, actually. So they've had some kind of trauma, and so they want to, right? Yeah, yeah.
It's really, it's all there. I know once you start to unpack, that's what I'm saying. You're going to feel like your life is a movie. And then it all of a sudden makes every single thing make sense because it all happened for you to learn from.